Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev, and in this video what I want to do is just talk about like how to upload something to GitHub. Just kind of the straightforward steps. I'm not going to get too deep into what is Git and how Git works. I do have videos on Git, so just on YouTube, just type in Alex Merced Git GitHub, and you'll find the videos where I kind of go deeper into that. But this is meant to be just sort of a quick, someone who's just trying to figure out like, okay, how do I get myself over to Git? How do I do it? Okay, using VSCode specifically. Bottom line is this: you generally always want to think of like one repo, one project. Don't try to put all your projects in one repository. Okay, and the easiest way to kind of avoid this is just think of it as folders. Okay, so generally the way I organize my stuff. Okay, so again, I'm using here. I have Visual Studio Code open. Okay, so this is assuming you're using Visual Studio Code. I click here, I click File, and then again, if you're using a Mac, File is going to be sort of like in this upper corner. But I'm going to click the Open Folder button, and generally what I do is I have like a folder called Development, and I kind of break everything down into folders from there. Okay, so I'll just make a new folder called Example Work. Okay, and then generally like this will, so let's pretend like this is your blank folder where you're going to be doing all your dev work from. Okay, so then from here, I'll make another folder for this specific project, okay, because I generally want to work out of an empty folder, so that way that folder can be a repository, and that's the repository, that's what I'm going to be pushing up to GitHub. So I'm going to make a folder, so we'll call this, project 1, doesn't really matter what you call it, and then now I'm going to open that folder. So you want to make sure to see, like I have selected that folder, and now I'm going to open it. And see, now I have my VS Code open to that folder, and again, there's a lot of things that are just going to be unique to sort of like my setup. So again, you're probably not going to have this .VSCode folder here unless you have, and it's not going to have colors because I'm using an extension called Peacock. So if you do want the colors on the window automatically, which does end up creating this .VSCode thing, because this is technically what this .VSCode folder is. It's a hidden folder with any settings to customize your VS Code. Okay, which is automatically created by the extension I'm using, Peacock. So if you don't see that, that's fine. That's not supposed to be there by default. That's just something because of my particular setup. Okay, but let's say this is like my folder. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a file. It doesn't matter what kind of file it is. It could be HTML, JavaScript, C++, whatever. It really doesn't matter. Whatever you have in this file, it's going to be what's part of our repository. So I'm going to say, we'll just create like a hello world.txt. Just a plain old text file that just literally has the words hello world in it. Okay, that's it. Okay, now VS Code does have a bunch of Git features built in that are available here. Okay, so essentially like I could initialize a repository here. So if I want to make this current folder a GitHub repository, I could click this initialize repository button. But I always like doing everything through terminal because not everywhere you go will you have VS Code. But the one thing you will have no matter what computer you use and what environment you're using is the terminal. Okay, because that's just basically the command line of the computer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the terminal. Keep in mind that when I open up terminal in VS Code, since I actually opened this, I used this open folder feature and opened it up to my blank folder. Like I didn't just like open up a file or just open up VS Code. I went up and opened the specific folder I plan to be working out of. It does something really nice for me. When I create a new terminal, that terminal is automatically going to be in the folder that I'm working out of. So I can see here. Good two things you always want to do at this point is you want to, one, double check that you are in the right folder. So do pwd, print working directory. That's going to print what folder you are in. Make sure that's the folder you think you are in. Two, you want to double check that you're not already in a Git repository, because you might have accidentally made a Git repository in a folder up the chain. And the way Git repositories work is that once one folder is a Git repository, everything under that folder is a Git repository. Okay, so that's why you generally only want to make the folders all the way at the bottom of if you think of all your files and folders as a tree, you generally want the folders at the bottom to really be your repos. Okay, so just how do I double check this? I just type in Git Status. Now if I type in Git Status, what that command does is going to check the status of a Git repository. But there is no Git repository here, so I get an error saying there is no Git repository. That's what I want. That assures me that this is currently not a Git repository, which is what I'm looking for, because I want to create one. Now to create a Git repository, I just type in git init. Okay, and literally see it says initialize a Git repository, and it tells you that that repository is inside this .git folder. Okay, we can actually see that if I type in like ls-la to see all the files and folders. See, I'll notice that a new .git folder is in here. That's the repository. Technically, that's the thing that Git looks at for it to do all of its magic. Okay, so now that that's there, see now all the Git features inside of VS Code have just turned on. Okay, and essentially what you can do here in VS Code is like if I have files that I've changed, they'll be listed here. I can add them to the next commit by hitting the plus button, and then make a commit by clicking over here on the arrow, and then that's done. Okay, so again, add files to be staged here, and then click the checkbox to commit. Again, I'm going to show you how to do that in terminal. Okay, but again, the idea is that VS Code does have features built in, so you can kind of do that right from there, now that the Git repository has been initialized. Now, at this point, what I want to do is I want to say git add, and I'm going to do git add dot. Git add dot means add everything that's in this folder and its subfolders. What I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, any files that are in here should be looked at. Because if I type in git status now, git status, see, it says, hey, there's only one file in this repository, hello world.txt, and right now we're not tracking it. So that means when I try to save it for the purposes of pushing it up to GitHub, it's not tracking that file. I do want to track it. I want to track all the files, so I do git add dot. If I just really wanted to say, if the only thing I really wanted to track was that hello world.txt, I could do git add hello world.txt, and then I'm just going to add that one specific file. Okay, and then if I type in git status now, see, that file is currently being tracked. So that means when I commit, so, and again, think of committing as taking a photograph of the state of your files and folders. Okay, I'm saying, okay, next time I take a photo, it's going to take a photo of this file. So I have committed where that file is. Okay, good. So now I can do a git commit, and you can see like the changes are happening here. So you see like now this file's already been added. So I could have just clicked the plus sign over here, but, and see I can do it here. I can also take it off. So if I want to take something away from the next commit, I can just hit subtract here, and now it's unstaged it for me. So I can do it in VS Code, I can do it from terminal, and here I can add it back to staging, hit the plus sign, and see it's being staged. Okay, I can now do git commit -m, and then I put a little message saying, okay, this is a commit message. So I could do that there, and again, you want to make sure you do not forget this -m, because what this does, it allows you to put the message in the command. If you don't put the -m, it's going to open up a terminal text editor to put in the message, and that always confuses people. They're like, where am I? How do I get out of this? Just avoid that and make sure you put the -m. So it's git commit -m, and then in quotation marks you put whatever you want to be the message for that snapshot. So in this case, this is a commit message. Okay, so now that's committed. And see right now, I can see here in VS Code, it's updated because there's no changes. Okay, what if I want to take a look at like those previous commits? I could go here in VS Code, I could go in the terminal and type in like git history or git log, and see that lists me a history of the commits. But again, I can do that in VS Code as well by going to like commits, and then I can kind of like see different commits. Okay, so see like here's the commit that I just made, and I can take a look at what files were changed, so I can examine that here. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Okay, so technically I've committed my code. That's step number one. I need to have a repo on my computer with commits. Again, if there's no commits, there's nothing for me to push to GitHub. Because what you're doing is you're saying what happens is when you push to GitHub, you're taking any commits that are on your computer but not online yet, and you're pushing them to another repository that's at github.com, and that repository will then receive those commits. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go head over to github.com, and I'm going to go create a new repository. So from github.com, I'm going to create a new repository. Okay, and I'm going to call this, my example repo. Okay, it doesn't matter what I call it. I'm going to make sure it's public. Okay, unless you have some reason you want to keep your code private, generally you should keep it public. Don't choose any of this stuff. Just don't touch this. Okay, because we want a fresh repository. Anytime you change any of this, it's going to add files, and those count as commits. So technically, there's going to be pre-existing commits, and the commit history between the repo I just made and the repo I have on GitHub are not going to match. And then that's going to create some complexities that we can just avoid dealing with by not touching this. Okay. The other way you could have done this is if I did want to touch these things first, I would have gone to github.com first, made the repo, and then cloned it down. But let's just keep it simple. Okay, so I'm going to create repository that creates now. So now there's a repo online at github.com. This could work. This is essentially the same way it would work if you're using GitLab or Bitbucket or Amazon's Git thing. It's always the same idea, because the idea is that Git does not know what GitHub is. GitHub is a website. Git is a software. All Git knows is that it can share commits with other repositories through a URL. Okay, so long as it knows the URL of that Git repo that's on some other computer or on the same computer somewhere, it can then push the commits to that repo. So that's what this is for. This is the URL to the repo that we're going to be adding to our repository. Okay, now which one should you choose, HTTPS or SSH? It depends. Did you set up SSH? Okay, that means you set up an SSH key and then you added it to your GitHub account. If you have not done that, then you do not want to use SSH. Then you would want to use the HTTPS URL, which you can tell because it has HTTPS in front of it. If you set up SSH, and if you want to, I have a video. Again, just look up YouTube, AlexMercedCoder.dev, and you'll see a video where I can guide you through how to set up SSH. I have SSH set up, so I'm going to use this repo. I'm going to use this URL because, again, the nice thing about SSH, once it's set up, I don't have to worry about entering in usernames and passwords every time. I don't care about all this. I mean, this is kind of like one guide to do it, but honestly, all you really need is the URL. Okay, so all I care about is the URL, because all I want to do is just tell my repository that when I want to push commits, I want to push it here. So I grab this URL, I copy it. I'm going to head back to VS Code. And there's two ways, again, there's always two ways I can do it. I can do it through VS Code or I can do it in terminal. So these other repos that I'm pushing to are referred to as remotes. Okay, so I can go here and I can add a remote through VS Code. So I can hit plus, and it's just going to ask me to put in like a name for the remote. Okay, so I'll just call it cheese. And then it's going to ask me for the URL. Okay. And see, now I've added a remote called cheese. Okay. I could also do it through the terminal. I would type in like git remote add, because I'm adding a remote. I have to give it a name. Usually the name of your first remote is called origin. And then you put in the URL. Okay. And then this command will add the origin remote. Okay. Cool. So that's been added. Okay, now if I refresh this, I should see both remotes now. Well, it should have been added. Let me just do this. Git, if you want to see the list of remotes, you can always type in git remote -v. This will list any remotes associated with your repo. So yeah, see, I have two remotes. I have cheese and I have origin. Those are my two remotes that I have associated with this particular repository, which means I can push. So this repository I have set up in this folder can now push its commits to these URLs, okay, which are just both the same URL. Okay. So again, now I can push the code up to GitHub. I can use like this like publish branch. I think I could probably just do it here. Let me see here. If I go here, what are my options here? Fetch, connect to remote, open repository and remote. Do I want to do any of those things? I'm assuming this publish branch button will publish it to one of the remotes. We'll try it out. So if I hit publish, yep, see, it lets you choose which remote you want to publish your code to, and you can publish your code to it. Okay, which means push it up. Or I could do it in terminal, and I would just type in git push, and I would say, okay, which one of these two remotes do I want to push to? I want to push to origin. And then it's going to ask me which branch I want to push to. And again, over here, I can see which branches I have. Right now, there's only one branch, main. Okay, and I can see that listed here in my prompt too. Like I'm on the main branch. Generally, like if you don't do anything, you're going to have a branch either called main or master as your only branch. Okay, again, you can see in VS Code, you can check it right there so that way you know if it's main or master. Okay, if you have other branches, you would know because you created them. So git push origin master. So I'm saying, hey, oh, not master, main for me. So I'm saying git push, I want to push any commits to the origin repository based on the main branch. So any commits I have on my main branch that are not in the remote repository will get pushed up. So then I hit push, I hit that, and there we go. Now that code's been pushed. Okay. So now if I go back to VS Code, if I go back to github.com and I refresh the page, there's the files. Okay, so but again, bottom line is you have two ways you can do this. You can do this with terminal, which again you'll always have access to, so you do want to kind of get comfortable with that. And you have VS Code, which VS Code has a nice, again, this nice tool here under this logo, this little like button right here, this icon, that lets you do all the Git stuff right from VS Code, making life a lot easier. So hopefully this helps you out. My name is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, hit that little subscribe button, and you know, feel free to leave a comment. Okay, and I'll see y'all later on. Have a good one.